it's Joe Biden who is really not going to be good for Britain if he gets in.
Well, I think actually it's kind of academic who the President of the United States of America is. I heard your earlier comments, and I'm completely with you that Trump is substance over style, and Biden isn't even style over substance. But I think what really matters in the U.S. is not really the presidency. I think the complexion of the House of Representatives is a much more important factor, in determining whether or not we get a trade deal. But moreover, I'm not even sure we need to worry about a trade deal with the U.S. Everyone bangs on about it, but actually, many of the states in the United States of America are just as big as we are, and we'd be better off, I think, targeting governors of states, mayors of cities, and doing deals on a bespoke basis that suit the UK. It may not be as sexy as doing a deal with the US as a whole. But there's a hell of a lot to pick from with the US. And by the way, just in case there are any Remainers listening to this program, the United States is by far the single biggest country with which we trade, and we have a very balanced trading relationship with them, unlike the extremely unbalanced trading relationship we have with the European Union.
Yeah, which puts us at an advantage in this case.
It really does. I mean, actually, one of the interesting anomalies about trade with the US is that we in the UK think we're running a slight surplus with them, and they, for reasons which are not clear to me, think they're running a slight surplus with us. So we both think we're getting the better end of the deal, and that's got to be good for trade.
Well, that's actually a pretty good idea, isn't it? If we all think we're having the best side of the deal, I mean, then it's going to be better. But this discussion in Washington, Joe Biden's advisors saying that we will not be the main source for contact in Europe if Joe Biden wins the election. That sounds like a threat.
Yeah, but you've got to look again at the numbers behind this apparent threat. And the EU and US have tried for years to get a deal done. And the reason they can't get a deal done is effectively the same reason we have such a bad trading relationship with the European Union. And that is that German exports are effectively flattered by a weakened euro. And the US, understandably, doesn't want to open itself up to German exports of cars and everything else with a subsidized euro unless it gets something in return. And when it seeks that something in return, for example, export of its own agricultural goods to the European Union, you get countries like France saying, well, we don't want that because that's going to affect our farming industry. So the real problem for the US and an EU trade deal is Germany. And we don't have that. But the minute we leave the EU, we're much more likely to be able to strike a deal with the US than if we're in the European Union, irrespective of how much bigger the EU's economy might be.
Yeah.
Why do these Remainers, of which I sadly was one during the vote, but realised after long conversations with various people, mostly female as well when I think about it, anyway, that I'd made the wrong decision, and when I looked at it closely, realised that there's no union in Europe. It's more of an empire, possibly being built by Germany. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit unfair, but the restrictions imposed by the European so-called Union, I like to refer to it now as the European Empire, just are really bad for this country. Why are there so many little lovies around in the media who don't seem to be intelligent enough to actually understand it?
Well, I think that there is a contempt that's developed over many years, I think since Blair became Prime Minister, a contempt for the average voter. Yeah. It's almost as if the average voter is just assumed to be a thickie, and their views shouldn't be taken seriously. And a great deal of faith is therefore put into institutions and into large corporations, and in this case, the supranational entity that is the European Union. There's a kind of belief that this massive monolithic institution, which, by the way, I totally agree with you, has imperial intentions, is going to be better at running the UK than our own government would be on a democratic basis. But, there are many people in this country who believe in democracy, and I think the three of us probably do. I certainly do. I'm sure you do.
Yeah,
too.
of course. If
And-
not,
and-
benevolent dictatorship would be nice.
Yeah, but you don't get benevolent. Power
No, I
corrupts
know.
and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the more power that goes to the EU, the
The more corrupt
in
it
fact,
becomes.
the more corrupt. And if you look at the way they've conducted their negotiations with us, they treated us with utter contempt from the minute that we exercised our constitutional right, by the way, to leave the EU in accordance with Article 50.
Yeah.
And instead of allowing us to leave as a friend, they have done everything to make it difficult.
As
for
did
us.
our own MPs. Well, a lot
As
of them.
did
A
our
lot
own
of them,
MPs.
yeah.
The same people who actually have a contempt for democracy.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately, in fact, I don't want to make this a personal story, but that is ultimately why I stood up myself and got out of my comfort zone of business and got stuck in with these people, because I just could see that they're just riding roughshod.
It's not
over-
just the contempt for democracy.
I
Like
think,
you say,
hang
it's the
hang on,
contempt
both of you. Just a minute, both of you. I think we need to make the point very clearly that it is not members of the countries of the European Union, the Italians, the French, the Germans, the Spanish, and anybody else that's in there too. So many I can't remember. I don't have any problem with any of the people. I love spending my time, particularly in France and Italy. Those two countries are my favourites, I have to admit. And I don't want us to look as if we're falling out with the people of those countries. I'm glad to say now that those particular two countries I mentioned have a very strong group of people there who would like to leave the European empire as well.
There are a growing dissatisfaction with the EU. And, it's going to go on trying to regulate and control these people using the debt burden that these countries now have as a kind of weapon to hold them in the same way that they weaponized Greek debt back in 2012, as I'm sure, we all recall.
And that was run by Germany, basically, wasn't it?
That was. It's a very good point you make. When Varoufakis...
Well, let's not hang on, Ben.
It was, wasn't it? It was a very good point.
Hang
I
on,
made,
Ben.
Yeah.
Let's not go too much on the flattery of Ash. If
I
you
think
don't
that was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is a very pertinent point. When Varoufakis got on a plane to negotiate the restructuring of Greek debt, he didn't go to the IMF. He didn't actually go to the ECB. He went to see Angela Merkel.
Yeah.
And that's because Germany calls the shots in Europe.
Yeah.
And we saw that recently with the German Constitutional Court deciding that the ECB had overstepped the mark as far as its quantitative easing program was concerned. And immediately Merkel got together with Macron, and they decided actually the European Union can go over the head of the ECB, ignore the Karlsruhe Court's ruling, and raise its own debt and fund its own program of member state funding. And it's an extraordinary thing when you see Germany taking these actions, against member states who are powerless to do anything about it because they're caught in this web of debt.
They did it with Italy as well, didn't they?
Absolutely, absolutely squarely with Italy. And now we're talking about countries with debt to GDP ratios of pushing 200%. We're at 100%. But the UK can never default on its sovereign debt because we have our own currency. We can go on printing it. As abominable as some people might think that activity is.
What do you think, Ben? What do you? Ben. What do you think of all these people who are going on, Brits who are going on in and out of the political system of this country about how terrible it is that we're prepared to break a law we signed up to and we should be struck off this and struck off that? It just seems a load of old tosh to me, If there's a law that we actually, not all laws are good.
No, it's absolute tosh. And the biggest contract and the most important contract that the current government has is not with the European Union. It's with the British people when it promised that we would leave the European Union whole, intact, taking back control of our laws, our borders, our cash, and our fishing. And that's the contract that Boris needs to honour. He needs to ignore all the factions in his own party that might be putting pressure on him to concede the withdrawal agreement and to stick with it. because the withdrawal agreement, as we've discussed in the past, is a terrible document for the United Kingdom. I don't know why Boris signed it, but having signed it and now having realised by his own admission that it's a terrible document, he should now repudiate it. He should drop it and he should honour his contract with the British people. And by the way, if anything was going to harm Britain's international standing as far as the adherence of law is concerned, it would have been the illegal war that we perpetrated against Iraq back in 2003,
Quite right.
where Blair ignored all conventions, stuck on George Bush's coattails, and took this country to an illegal war where hundreds of thousands of people died and where we are still suffering the consequences today.
Yeah.
And you know, the interesting thing is that had Boris not signed it, we'd probably still be arguing and still not out of the European Union now. So I'm very pleased that he did
It's
sign
quite a clever plan if it was a plan to win the election with a landslide.
I think it was not a plan to win the election. I think it was just that the British people wanted out of the European Union.
But like you say, he has a contract with the British people, which is more important than someone else's contract.
I've not
Absolutely.
done an interview with any Remainer who did anything but try to treat Ash and I with contempt and look down their snotty lefty noses at us. Do you remember that last one? I got really quite rude to. He's never come back. Well, I don't want him back. I mean, there are. To be fair, I'm running out of Remainers who will come on the programme because they've got no argument.
And they get quite nasty, don't they?
They get really horrible. Yeah. At least when I start. Go on.
I had a little run-in with Femi in the run-up to this interview because he posted something. You know, Femi, sorry. You know, run-in.
I wouldn't even bother with him because all he's got is a very large mouth, if I might be so.
And small T-shirts.
Bold. Yeah, and T-shirts that are at least a size too small, Ash, for a man of his shape. Yeah. You know, and all he does is look down his nose at you when you talk to him. And if you say so, and he goes on about this and that, And is he still doing Brexit? I thought he moved on to something else.
He's still Ramoning away on Twitter. And
I don't follow him. I don't look at him. I don't care about him.
Nor do I. In fact,
that's finished him coming on this show. But there are loads of other people who use him.
Yeah, I've got him muted. But one of my mates retweeted something he did or sent it to me. And anyway, it was brought to my attention. Anyway, he's talking a lot of crap about the EU-Japan trade deal. And anyway, if you want to have a debate, if you want to get a Remainer on, I'm very happy to have a head-to-head with Femi because, someone's got to just debunk this Ramona rubbish.
As long as he'll stay on after I've said I think he needs to actually find himself a new dresser. You know, he needs some kind of a stylist. A stylist, yeah. I mean, I'm very good at that. I do styling. No, I'm serious about this. I could style him. It'll cost him a lot, but I could style him. But you know, he just talks rubbish all the time.
He does.
I think he actually sees. And Femi, if you're listening, mate, you're more than welcome to come on the program and have your right of reply. And none of the Remainers really are prepared to sort of come on and argue it. They just say, we're right, and that's it.
Yeah, well, they have this, I think it's born, again, out of this anti-democratic view, this kind of view that the average person shouldn't have the right to vote because they're so sick. And so when they look at us, Brexiteers, they're just kind of looking down at us thinking...
Like the BBC do as well,
The BBC are really quite...
Same sort of thing,
Yeah.
It's that
Ben, I've got
liberalism.
Yeah. I've got to go to a commercial break. If Femi ever agrees to come on my show again, which is doubtful, I will invite you on and you and he can have a bit of a bust up on the air. Yeah, that will be quite fun. Ben Habib, thank you, Ben, co-founder of Unlocked and former Brexit Party MEP. What are your thoughts on this?